All right, guys. So today we're going to talk about political corruption during the Gilded Age. So some of this stuff you're going to know already, maybe from American One or maybe just from your other history classes you've had. But anything in this blue color will be on your test or is fair game to be on your test. Now, you don't need to know every single thing, but you have a note sheet that hopefully you're filling out along with this. That way you have some notes to go back and study. I know I'm not going over this with the entire class, but I created this screencast. That way you have something to study because of everything we talk about during the Gilded Age. This portion right here, the political corruption, is heavily tested on your final exam. So I want to make sure you have some stuff to study. Now, before we really dig into the political corruption, this is stuff that you should already know because of what we discussed in class the other day. You should know the difference between a robber baron and a captain of industry. Remember, a robber baron is somebody who treats their workers poorly, who has poor working conditions, who makes them work crazy amount of hours. And on the other hand, you have a captain of industry. This person treats their workers really well. They got ahead by treating people well and working hard and making money the right way. So make sure you know the difference between them. Now, that's pretty basic in this topic, in this unit. So make sure you have that down. Now, social Darwinism. This is survival of the fittest in a business sense. So if I'm a robber baron, I use social Darwinism as justification for how I treat my workers. I believe that if I'm a robber baron, have some traits, have some skills that these workers of mine just simply don't have. So I see them as almost defective or less than. So again, a robber baron would use social Darwinism as justification for how they treat their workers. Make sure you know the difference between vertical and horizontal integration. Horizontal integration usually results in a monopoly. Make sure you know the gospel of wealth. That was created by Andrew Carnegie. That is the belief that rich people were handpicked by usually a higher power to be wealthy, and they should give this money to poor people. They should give money to libraries, to schools. It's called philanthropy. Make sure you know that word philanthropy. So that's basically the gospel of wealth. And then make sure you know information about the robber barons and captains of industry you have on your chart with the QR codes. So make sure you have them, please. Again, you may see a couple questions about them on your test, like what industry they're associated with. So make sure you know that. So please don't feel like you have to write all of this stuff in blue down, but I wanted it to stand out to you. So if anything, I'd focus on the laissez-faire economics, but this slide is just an introduction to the political corruption that happened during the Gilded Age. So the government believed in laissez-faire economics. The government during this time period was so hands-off, so far disconnected from everything going on in society, that they were blind and ignorant to the corruption. Now, there were some people like congressmen who accepted bribes or participated in this corruption. So, again, the government in and of itself was corrupt, don't get me wrong, but they were so far distanced from the corruption going on in business that they may not have even known it was going on. So again, the government was corrupt, but it's kind of their own fault they were corrupt because they were so hands-off. Now, the three vocab terms here are very important. They're basic vocab terms to this unit, but they really help you understand what's going on. So the graft. We'll talk about this more on the next slide, but this is acquiring money through dishonest or questionable means and using your position for some form of gain. So think of a politician who might pay off the local policeman to look the other way while they participate in corrupt politics or participate in corruption or do something they shouldn't. So this usually refers to politicians who use their power or their governmental power for some form of gain. And we'll talk about that more in a second. The spoil system is something, hopefully, that you learned in American History 1, but this is giving your friends positions in the government that they are not qualified for. So let's say during the last election, President Trump was obviously running, and let's say I gave him $1 million. Well, obviously he won the last election, so when he won, he saw that I gave him $1 million, and he thought I was a loyal supporter, so he gave me the Surgeon General job. Now, I am nothing more than a history teacher with no medical background at all, so I would be grossly unqualified for this position, but President Trump saw me as a loyal supporter, and again, he gave me this job that I'm not qualified for. Now, let me give you a little disclaimer. I will never share my political views, and please don't take me using this example as I'm a Trump supporter or anything of that nature. So I'm just using this as an example. Political machines, that is organizations that were focused on keeping one person or group in power. Now, again, I'll talk more about that on the next slide because it'll make more sense. So this guy right here, Boss Tweed. Yes, he went by Boss Tweed. He ran the political machine in Tammany Hall. So again, if you remember what a political machine was, this guy, Boss Tweed, ran the political machine that was in Tammany Hall. So he was the most powerful. That's why people talk about him. He was really involved in defrauding the government. He would have fake construction companies charge the government crazy amount of money, like $5,000 for a little chair or $20,000 for silverware, or if he was having a fake construction company build a house, it would cost like 10, 15 times what it usually costs, and then he would split that money with other corrupt people. And he also used immigrants to do the dirty work, which basically means the immigrants made people vote for specific candidates. They'd be the ones that would ensure that candidates that Boss Tweed supported or other political machines supported stayed in power. That way they could continue to be corrupt. So again, Boss Tweed, super corrupt man. He ran the political machine in New York City called Tammany Hall, and this would be an example of the graft. This right here. So again, political machine, Tammany Hall, run by Boss Tweed, and this would be your example of the graft. He used his position for some form of economic aid. So right there's your textbook definition. This slide right here and this slide right here go well together. So make sure you know that information, please. Now, corruption in the White House. I know there's a lot of blue up here. I know that this seems like a lot, but again, I'll tell you some of the main things that you need to know. So when Ulysses S. Grant was in office, the credit mobilier scandal, this word is actually French, and yes, it is mobilier. You can call it mobilier. I don't know what you're talking about. But this is the credit mobilier scandal of 1872. The Union Pacific Railway used the Credit Mobilier Construction Company to scam money from the federal government, and to keep them quiet, the construction company gave stocks to congressmen to avoid investigation. So Union Pacific Railway Railroad was part of the Transcontinental Railroad. Well, one of the companies, the Credit Mobilier, who was building it, decided to tell the government it was costing way more money to build what they were building than what it actually did. When congressmen started to get suspicious, they actually started to give them stocks, so these people would shut up, get out of the way, and let the Credit Mobilier construction company do what they want and defraud the government. Then we move to James Garfield. He was assassinated, leaving Chester Arthur to become president. You don't need to write that down, but I wanted you to know that James Garfield was a president. He was assassinated very early on, and Chester Arthur became president. Chester Arthur created the Pendleton Civil Service Act, which ended the spoils system. So the Pendleton Civil Service Act requires people to take tests. It's a civil service test before you can have some of these positions. So again, if President Trump decided to try to make me Surgeon General, I'd have to take a civil service test that would really test my expertise. If I failed, obviously I couldn't take the job. So the Pendleton Civil Service Act ended the spoils system. I'm not a betting man, but if I was, I'd probably know this for your final. And then all of the presidents during the Gilded Age are referred to as the forgotten presidents. It's not good to be a forgotten president, but these people were largely ineffective. Big business kind of controlled everything that was going on, and these politicians did nothing to really move the country forward. Probably the biggest thing that came out of the White House during this time was the Pendleton Civil Service Act. So again, make sure you know that. And then I always like to show this. So this came out of a Harper's Weekly during the Gilded Age. And here are a bunch of politicians, like here's Boss Tweed. and everybody's looking around who stole the people's money. They're all pointing fingers. They don't know, well, they know who did it, but they're not going to blame anybody for it other than the man standing next to him. So, again, right there is Boss Tweed. Just a little political cartoon. You may or may not see that on your test. Now, the conclusion. If on your note sheet, and I'm not typing this part up, so you may have to listen to my instructions again. So, on your note sheet, if you write 3 sentences describing the corruption during the Gilded Age on your note sheet, and you bring it to me, I'll initial it, and you can use it on your next test. I know some of you aren't going to listen. This is my little test to see who's actually listening to what I'm saying, because there's a lot of good information on this screencast. So again, on your note sheet, anywhere on there, if you write 3 sentences describing corruption or political corruption during the Gilded Age, and you bring it to me, I'll initial it, and you can use on your next test. So this is all I got. If you have any questions or concerns, please let me know. But again, anything in blue, I would definitely know. All right, guys, thanks.